In June 1775, Captain James Harrod dispatched a hunting party from the settlement he founded in the previous summer of 1774, known as Harrodstown, and later called Harrodsburg. What the small hunting party discovered later became Lexington, the largest settlement in Kentucky in that era, spawning dozens of men who became the pioneer leaders, Indian fighters, soldiers, innovative horse breeders, cattlemen, agriculturalists, merchants, land speculators, educators, and politicians who would hold office at every level of local, state, and federal government for the next 100 years and beyond. Many of these men were Freemasons and were citizens involved in world affairs politically, economically, and culturally, a history congruent with the founding of the nation. The first military engagement between colonials and the British took place in April 1775. The battles of Lexington and Concord marked the outbreak of the Revolutionary War. According to historical accounts written in the late 1800s, this battle led to the naming of the future city of Lexington by members of that hunting party. By 1780, Fort Lexington was built, and the town was starting to develop as it became more settled. The presence of Indians was no longer the primary threat. Broken law and order were better established. Although buildings and clothing were still crude, the foundations of a stable society was established. Among the prominent leaders and founders of that society were Freemasons, who migrated from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, and other colonies, and many veterans of the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. The history of any Masonic lodge is essentially the history of the lives of the men it sends forward into the world. If their lives are worthy and productive, then perhaps Freemasonry may be credited to some extent. After all, there are natural truths taught in the lodge, truths calculated to make men wiser, better, and more capable of not only becoming more responsible for their own actions and behaviors, but also more tolerant to the behavior and actions of others. These truths and behaviors were certainly essential and in demand during the era in which Freemasonry came to Kentucky. The importance and role Freemasonry played in the lives of early colonists, and particularly those in early Lexington, cannot be discounted. As a fraternity offering a bond of brotherhood, teaching tolerance, promoting self-governance and self-responsibility, morality, and centered on civic-mindedness and communal assistance to members and non-members alike, was hard to find in organizations outside the church. The attractiveness of an organization whose bylaws, rules, and philosophical principles encouraged learning, gentlemanly behavior, and a ban on discussion of politics and religion inside the lodge room was a very welcome environment to the men of the period as well as today. A small group of men who were Masons in Lexington in the mid-1770s had no regularly chartered lodge to attend. The closest was in Virginia, some 250 miles away. Freemasonry had, in early communities within the colonies and later the United States, brought men together, providing instruction on moral sciences, teaching tolerance, charity, self-improvement, and democracy, the importance of faith, family values, and citizenship. Men in the burgeoning community of Lexington sought these constructive influences. In November 1788, a small group of Masons in Lexington petitioned the Grand Lodge of Virginia to authorize the establishment of a Masonic lodge in their city. The charter was approved and issued, and the original hangs today in the lodge room of Lexington Lodge No. 1. Lexington became the home of the first Masonic lodge to have a continuous existence west of the Appalachian mountain range, and the fountainhead for the establishment of other Masonic lodges in Kentucky for the next 12 years. The lodge was designated by Virginia as Lexington Lodge No. 25, since it was the 25th lodge chartered by that Grand Lodge. When the Grand Lodge of Kentucky was formed in 1800, the lodge was renamed and designated Lexington Lodge No. 1. The first three principal officers named and authorized to start the lodge were well-known figures, not only in Kentucky, but in the colonies. Richard Clow Anderson was a military figure from the American Revolution, and because of the many battles he took part in, was known as a walking history of the Revolutionary War. He spent the winter at Valley Forge and fought with Washington at Trenton, where he was wounded. While recovering, he became lifelong friends with Lieutenant James Madison, also wounded at Trenton, and who would later become the fourth President of the United States. Anderson was appointed by Washington as aide to General Marquis de Lafayette, another Freemason with whom he became a lifelong friend. He was promoted to colonel by Washington at Yorktown, where he witnessed the surrender of Cornwallis. In 1784, he migrated to Kentucky, where he acquired a 500-acre plantation in Jefferson County. His mansion, called Soldier's Retreat, became famous for its hospitality. Andrew Jackson, Aaron Burr, and James Madison were among his celebrity guests at the plantation. Colonel Anderson accompanied Lafayette through Kentucky when the Marquis returned for his triumphant tour of the nation in 1824-25. Anderson County, Kentucky, is named in his honor. Among his sons was Major Robert Anderson, who was in command of Fort Sumter when the Civil War began. Green Clay was a politician and served in both the American Revolution and the War of 1812. Following his service in the Continental Army during the Revolution, he moved to Kentucky at age 23, where he became a surveyor. After several shrewd land acquisitions, he became the owner of 3 distilleries and a tavern, as well as 2 important ferries across the Kentucky River. He was a member of the House of Delegates in Virginia, representing the District of Kentucky, and later, once Kentucky became a state, he served as Speaker of the House, and later in the Senate of the Kentucky General Assembly. During the War of 1812, Clay became a general in the Kentucky militia. After the war, he returned to his plantation and spent the rest of his life farming and in politics. He is thought to have been the wealthiest man in Kentucky of his time. Green Clay was the father of Brutus Clay and Cassius Marcellus Clay, a cousin of famous statesman Henry Clay, who would also later become master of Lexington Lodge No. 1. John Fowler studied in the common schools and served as captain in the early Kentucky militia during the Revolutionary War. In 1777, he joined the Colonial Army as a lieutenant under the command of Captain Robert Patterson, who had been a member of the hunting party in 1775 that founded Lexington. He was a member of the Williamsburg, Virginia Lodge No. 6, and was Virginia House of Delegates and member of the Virginia Convention that ratified the United States Constitution in 1788. Fowler began his service in the United States Congress in 1797. He became a well-known and highly respected citizen, an active civic leader in the future development of Lexington, holding various elected and appointed positions ranging from trustee of Lexington to postmaster. He ultimately established Fowler's Gardens on 300 acres near Lexington as a recreational resort. All 3 men, aside from being Freemasons, were members of the Political Club and the Kentucky Society for Promotion of Useful Knowledge. Each man served as a soldier, influential civic leader, entrepreneur, early landholder, and played significant roles in the successful settling of Kentucky, while taking part in the state's struggle for independence from Virginia. So what is Freemasonry? Freemasonry is the oldest fraternity in the world. No one knows just how old it is, because the actual origins have been lost in time. It likely arose from the guilds of stonemasons who built the castles and cathedrals of the Middle Ages, and from the earliest of those operative stonemason guilds and lodges in Scotland as far back as the 1300s. These craftsmen were in possession of highly prized skills in mathematics and architecture, which they in turn passed on to apprentices who had been accepted as being worthy of being taught the secrets of their trade. In 1717, Masonry created a formal organization in England when the first Grand Lodge was formed. A Grand Lodge is the administrative body in charge of Masonry in some geographical area. In the United States, there is a Grand Lodge in each state and the District of Columbia. Local organizations of Masons are called lodges. There are lodges in most towns, and large cities usually have several. There are over 12,000 lodges in the United States and 370 lodges in Kentucky. How did Freemasonry get to America? In a time when travel was by horseback and sailing ship, Masonry spread with amazing speed. By 1731, when Benjamin Franklin joined the fraternity, there were already several lodges in the colonies, and Masonry spread rapidly as America expanded west. In addition to Franklin, many of the founding fathers, men such as George Washington, Paul Revere, Joseph Warren, and John Hancock, were Masons. Masons and Masonry played an important part in the Revolutionary War, and an even more important part in the Constitutional Convention and the debates surrounding the ratification of the Bill of Rights. Many of those early debates were held in Masonic lodges. Of the 57 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, 9 were Freemasons, and of the 39 who signed the Constitution, 13 were Freemasons. What's a lodge? A lodge is a meeting in some place and the room or building in which Freemasons meet. Masonic buildings are also symbols. Masonry uses them to teach its lessons, originating from the building of King Solomon's temple seen in the structures which the operative stonemasons built against the sides of cathedrals during construction. The worshipful master presides in the east. He is called this for the same reason the leader of the first violins in an orchestra is called the master. Senior and junior wardens are the first and second vice presidents. The deacons are messengers, and the stewards have charge of refreshments. Every lodge has an altar on which sits what is called the volume of sacred law. In the United States and Canada, almost always a Bible. However, Masonry practices tolerance of all religions, and in some lodges, a volume of the Quran or Torah also sits on the altar with the Bible. Masonry teaches that each person has a responsibility to make things better in the world. Masonry reminds its members of the importance of these qualities and education. It lets men associate with other men of honor and integrity, who believe that things like honesty, compassion, love, trust, and knowledge are important. While much of lodge activity is spent in lessons and self-development, much is also spent in fellowship. What is a Masonic degree? A degree is a stage or level of membership. It's also the ceremony by which a man attains that level of membership. There are three, called Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason. The names are taken from the early stonemason craft guilds. The degrees are ritual plays in which the candidate participates. Each degree uses symbols to teach, just as plays did in the Middle Ages and as many theatrical productions do today. The Masonic degrees teach the great lessons of life, the importance of honor and integrity, self-responsibility, of being a person on whom others can rely, of being both trusting and trustworthy, of realizing that you have a spiritual nature as well as a physical nature, of the importance of self-control, of knowing how to love and be loved, of knowing how to keep confidential what others tell you so that they can open up without fear. Masonic secrets. Freemasonry really isn't secretive, although it sometimes has that reputation. Masons certainly don't make a secret of the fact that they are members of the fraternity. They wear rings, lapel pins, and tie clasps with Masonic emblems like the square and compasses. The best known of Masonic signs which, logically, recall the fraternity's early symbolic roots in stonemasonry. Masonic buildings are clearly marked and are easily found on the internet. But there are some Masonic secrets, and they fall into two categories. The first are the ways in which a man can identify himself as a Mason, grips and passwords. We keep those private to prevent one from attempting to pass themselves off as Masons and seeking assistance in one form or another under false pretenses. The second group is harder to describe, but they are the ones Masons usually mean when there is talk about Masonic secrets. They are secrets because they literally cannot be easily explained or put into words. They are the changes that happen to a man when he really accepts responsibility for his own life, and at the same time, truly decides that his real happiness is helping others. Secret societies became very popular in America in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There were literally hundreds of them, and most people belonged to two or three. Many of them were modeled on Masonry and made a great point of having many secrets. Freemasonry got ranked with them. But if Masonry is a secret society, it's the worst kept secret in the world. Some people ask if Freemasonry is a religion. The answer to that question is simple: no. We do use ritual in meetings, and because there is always an altar or table with the volume of the sacred law open if a lodge is meeting, some people have confused Masonry with a religion, but it is not. That does not mean that religion plays no part in Masonry. It plays a very important part. A person who wants to become a Mason must have a belief in God. No atheist can ever become a Mason. Meetings open with prayer, and a Mason is taught, as one of the first lessons of Masonry, that one should pray for divine counsel and guidance before starting an important undertaking. But that does not make Masonry a religion. Masonry encourages every Mason to be active in the religion and church of his own choice. Masonry teaches that without religion, a man is alone and lost, and that without religion, he can never reach his full potential. But Freemasonry does not tell a person which religion he should practice or how he should practice it. That is between the individual and God. That is the function of his house of worship, not his fraternity. And Masonry is a fraternity, not a religion. So is Masonry education? Yes, in a very real sense, education and the study of human duties is at the center of Masonry. In the Middle Ages, schools were held in the lodges of stonemasons. You have to know a lot to build a cathedral: geometry and structural engineering and mathematics, just for a start. And that education was not very widely available. Most all formal schools and colleges at the time trained people for careers in the church, or in law or medicine. And you had to be a member of the social upper classes to go to those schools. Stonemasons did not come from the aristocracy, and so the lodges had to teach the necessary skills and information. Freemasonry's dedication to education started there. It has continued. Masons started some of the first public schools in both Europe and America. We supported legislation to make education universal. In the 1800s, Masons as a group lobbied for the establishment of state-supported education and federal land-grant colleges. Today, Freemasonry gives millions of dollars in scholarships each year. What does Masonry teach? Masonry teaches some important principles. There's nothing very surprising in the list. Masonry teaches that each person must take responsibility for his or her own life and actions. Neither wealth nor poverty, education nor ignorance, health nor sickness excuses any person from doing the best he or she can do or being the best person possible under the circumstances. No one has the right to tell another person what he or she must think or believe. Each man and woman has an absolute right to intellectual, spiritual, economic, and political freedom. This is a right given by God, not by man. All tyranny, in every form, is illegitimate. Each person must learn and practice self-control. Each person must make sure his spiritual nature triumphs over his base nature. Another way to say the same thing is that even when we are tempted to anger, we must not be violent. Faith must be in the center of our lives. We find that faith in our houses of worship, not in Freemasonry. But Masonry constantly teaches that a person's faith, whatever it may be, is central to a good life. At Lexington Lodge No. 1, a premium is placed on assuring each Mason is given not only wholesome instruction in each of the 3 structured degree classes, but learns the meaning of a genuine Masonic experience through fellowship. Continued Masonic education beyond the rituals and structured degree classes is also part of the cultural philosophy of No. 1, and strives to keep to the traditions of our Masonic heritage to assure men are consistently offered opportunity to pursue further education and self-development. Degree education. In 2011, the Education Committee at Lexington Lodge No. 1 was charged with the responsibility of advancing the design and structure of Masonic education programs for all 3 degrees. The approach was simple and based on the concept that our beautiful degree rituals serve as the passport to knowledge in each degree, but not necessarily all the Masonic education essential for the man who journeys into Freemasonry. In essence, while the ritual makes a man a Mason, it is through continued education that he becomes a Mason. Results of our program can be seen in the number of men who become Master Masons and then seek to become instructors. Immediately pursue opportunities to involve themselves in service to the lodge in committee work or other special projects, who often credit the degree education programs as providing them the impetus to continue a daily advancement of their Masonic knowledge on their own. The structured degree class model established at No. 1 has been adopted by other lodges in several states. In addition to the structured degree classes, Masonic education presentations are made during lodge meetings by members. The Rubicon Masonic Dinner Club, another group of Master Masons who meet and bring in nationally known speakers for presentations at education series events and festive boards, offers yet another avenue for Masons who seek continued advancement in their knowledge of self-improvement and fraternity. Lexington Lodge No. 1 also posts updates and notifications on its website, and is also linked to another site created by members of No. 1 called The Craftsman, where Masons can find articles, essays, commentaries, and other links to worthy Masonic websites. Just as the Lodge helped the city of Lexington fund and construct the city's first waterworks system in the late 1700s, today Lexington Lodge No. 1 continues to grow and engage in community works. The Lodge is affiliated and supports the legacy of one of its former Lodge masters, Henry Clay, through the preservation of Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate. The Lodge is also affiliated with the Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Bluegrass, the Kentucky Law Enforcement Memorial Foundation, the Carnegie Center for Learning and Literacy, and the Lexington Public Library. Although there isn't as much written about their lives as other Freemasons like Washington, Anderson, Clay, Fowler, George Rogers Clark, Henry Clay, Daniel Bradford, Joseph Davies, and many judges, mayors, governors, senators, and other historical figures, since 1788, thousands of men have been members of Lexington Lodge No. 1. Men who labored and integrated the principles of Freemasonry into their lives to become better men. Men who strived to keep those principles alive through the generations of more than 225 years. These other men were shopkeepers, blacksmiths, teachers, police officers, firemen, farmers and merchants, community leaders, career military men and business executives, those from virtually all walks of life, who found the rewards of bonding with like-minded men in the fraternal labor offered by Masonry to become better men, better husbands, fathers, neighbors, and citizens. Today, Freemasons continue to be the bedrock of the fraternity's membership, men who will carry forward the principles and lessons of the science of human duties to future generations of men who seek self-improvement.